He set the badge down on the glass desk without a single word. Not thrown, not slammed, just placed quiet, deliberate final right in front of the woman who had ordered him to obey or get out. The whole engineering floor stopped breathing. Damian Carter, the maintenance man. Nobody ever looked at twice, picked up his toolbox, turned his back on a billion-dollar company, and walked toward the door like a man who had already made peace with losing everything. But here's what Victoria Sterling didn't know. The man she just pushed out was the only person alive who understood why her company was about to fall apart. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight, so I can see how far this story has traveled. And if you believe no good man should ever have to choose between his dignity and his paycheck, subscribe and stay with me all the way to the end. 4:40 in the morning, and Damian Carter was already awake. He didn't need an alarm anymore. His body had learned the hour on its own, the way a body learns everything it has to survive. He lay still for a moment in the dark, listening to the old radiator tick, listening to the small sound of his daughter breathing down the hall. Then he swung his legs off the bed, planted his feet on the cold floor, and got up. There was breakfast to make. There was a lunch to pack. There was a little girl who deserved to wake up to a father who had never once let her feel like an afterthought. In the kitchen, he moved by habit. Coffee first, because the coffee kept the rest of the world running. Then 2 eggs in the pan scrambled soft the way Lily liked them. A piece of toast cut into triangles, because she said triangles tasted better than squares, and he had stopped arguing about that a long time ago. "Dad?" He turned. She was standing in the doorway in her pajamas, hair a mess, one sock on and one sock gone. "You're up early, baby." I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the science fair. The volcano. "It's not a volcano, Dad. It's a model of the water cycle. We already talked about this." He put a hand over his heart like she'd wounded him. "The water cycle. My mistake. Come sit down. Eggs are ready." She climbed into the chair and pulled her knees up under her, and he set the plate in front of her, and for one small perfect minute, the whole apartment was just the sound of a fork scraping a plate, and a little girl humming to herself. And Damian stood at the counter with his coffee, and thought, not for the first time, that if this was all he ever had, it would be enough. But it wasn't all he had, and he knew it, and the knowing followed him everywhere. "Dad, are we okay on money?" He almost dropped the cup. "Where's that coming from?" Marcus at school said his dad lost his job and now they can't get the good cereal anymore, and I was just thinking, are we okay? Damian set the cup down slow. He came around the counter and crouched in front of her so they were eye to eye, because there were some things you did not say to a child from across a room. "Look at me, Lily. You listening? I'm listening. You have never had to worry about a thing in your life, and you're not going to start at 7 years old. That's my job. Worrying is my job. Your job is the water cycle. Deal." She smiled, a small one, the kind that told him she wasn't completely convinced, but she wanted to be. "Deal. Now go find your other sock. You look like a pirate." She laughed and ran off, and he stayed there crouched for a second longer than he needed to. One hand on the chair she'd been sitting in, and let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Because the truth was, they were okay. For now. Rent was paid, the fridge was full. The good cereal was in the cabinet. But, for now, was a thin thread to hang a life on, and every single day he woke up praying that thread would hold one more day. He'd made himself a promise standing over his wife's grave 3 years ago. Whatever it costs. Whatever I have to swallow. That little girl will never go without. He had kept that promise every day since. He intended to keep it forever. He had no idea that the promise was about to cost him more than he ever imagined. By 6:15, he had Lily fed, dressed, backpack loaded, hair braided. He had learned to braid off a video and a lot of failure, and he could do a clean French braid now, which he was quietly proud of in a way he'd never admit to another man. He walked her to Mrs. Alvarez next door, who watched her and 2 other kids until the school bus came. "There he is," Mrs. Alvarez said, opening the door. "The only father on this whole block who braids better than me. Don't tell the other dads. They'll want lessons." How you holding up, Damien? Same as always. Standing? Standing's underrated. She took Lily's hand. Go on, she's fine. Go be brilliant. He knelt down one more time. Have a good day, baby. I'll be here at 3:30. You always are. That's right. I always am. He kissed the top of her head, and then he walked to the bus stop, and then he rode across the city to the tall building with the glass front where they let him fix their machines and forgot his name. Sterling Technologies took up 18 floors of a downtown tower, and the men and women who ran it wore suits that cost more than Damien made in a month. He came in through the service entrance the way he always did, badge scanned, and rode the freight elevator down to the sub-levels, where the real machines lived, the ones that kept the lights on the servers, cool the whole gleaming operation from grinding to a halt. Up on the executive floors, they talked about disruption and market share. Down here, Damien Carter kept the actual company alive with his 2 hands, and almost nobody upstairs knew he existed. But the engineers knew. Carter. Big Tom Reyes, 30 years on the systems team, met him at the door with 2 coffees and handed one over. You are not going to believe the morning we're having. Try me. They pushed the integration timeline again. Whole new system goes live in 3 weeks. 3. The board wants it done before the shareholder meeting. Damien stopped walking. 3 weeks, Tom. That migration was scoped for 4 months. Tell that to the corner office. That's not a timeline. That's a suicide note. You want to be the one who says that to the new CEO? Tom shook his head. She's already fired 2 managers this quarter for, quote, negative energy. Damien took a slow sip of the coffee and didn't answer because he was already doing the math, and the math was ugly. Victoria Sterling had taken over the company 8 months ago after her father stepped down. Damien had seen her exactly twice, both times from across a room, both times surrounded by people nodding at everything she said. She was young, early 30s, maybe sharp, fast-talking, and clearly carrying the weight of a name she was terrified of failing. He didn't dislike her. He didn't know her well enough to dislike her, but he'd watched enough executives come and go to recognize the look in her eye. It was the look of someone who had decided that being right and being fast were the same thing. They weren't. He knew that better than anyone. He had the scars to prove it. Where do you need me? Damien asked. Cooling loop on the server floors acting up again, and they want us to sign off on the new power routing for the integration. Sign off, Damien repeated. Sign off. Have you looked at the routing? Tom hesitated. I looked at it. And Tom lowered his voice, even though there was nobody around. And I don't like it. But I got 2 kids in college, Carter, and I'm 61, and I'm not about to be the guy who tanks the timeline. You want to look at it? You look at it. You've always seen things the rest of us miss. That should have been a compliment. It landed like a warning. Damien looked at it. He looked at it for 3 hours in the cold hum of the sublevel, with the schematics spread across a workbench and a pencil behind his ear. And the longer he looked, the colder he got. And it had nothing to do with the temperature. The new system was routing critical load through a junction that wasn't rated for it. Under normal use, it would hold. But this system wasn't going to run under normal use. It was going to run at full capacity on day 1. Feeding and integration, nobody had properly stress tested because there'd been no time to stress test anything. And that junction, that one undersized junction buried 3 levels below where any executive would ever look, was the kind of thing that held fine right up until the day it didn't. And on the day it didn't, it wouldn't be a glitch. It would be a cascade. It would take down the cooling, and when the cooling went, the servers went, and when the servers went, so did every client depending on them. He'd seen it before. Not here. Somewhere else a long time ago. He carried that somewhere else with him every day of his life. He set down the pencil. Tom, he called. Come look at this. Tom came over, put on his glasses, followed Damien's finger across the schematic, watched his face change. Oh, Tom said quietly. Oh, that's bad. That's a fire waiting for a match. Can we route around it? Yeah, but it adds time, real time. You can't fix this in 3 weeks and do it right. Tom took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes, and he looked every one of his 61 years. They're not gonna want to hear that. I know. Carter, listen to me. I've watched a lot of good men get chewed up in this building for being right at the wrong time. You've got that little girl. Don't put your neck out for a company that doesn't even know your last name. Damien looked at the schematic for a long moment. Then he looked at Tom. If I sign off on this and it fails, people could get hurt. And I'd know. Every day for the rest of my life I'd know. So don't sign it. Just don't say anything. Let it be somebody else's problem. You know I can't do that. Tom sighed the sigh of a man who had already lost the argument. Yeah, he said. I know you can't. That's your whole problem, Damien. You're the only honest man in a building full of people getting rich off pretending. Damien wrote the report that afternoon. He didn't dress it up. He didn't soften it. He laid it out the way he'd lay out a problem to another engineer. Here's the fault. Here's why it fails. Here's what it costs to fix it. Here's what it costs if you don't. He attached the schematics. He circled the junction in red, and at the bottom he wrote one line in plain English so nobody could pretend they hadn't understood it. This system is not safe to go live on the current timeline. Recommend immediate review before proceeding. Then he did something he almost never did. He walked it upstairs himself. He rode the passenger elevator, the one with the mirrored walls, the one he wasn't technically supposed to use up to the executive floor, and he stood in that carpeted quiet in his gray uniform with a folder in his hand, and he felt every set of eyes track him like he'd wandered in off the street. Can I help you? A young man in a slim suit, some kind of assistant, stepped in front of him. I need to get this to Ms. Sterling. It's about the integration project. It's urgent. You can leave it with me. No, I need to make sure she sees it. It's a safety issue. The assistant's eyes flicked down to the gray uniform, and Damien watched a decision get made behind them. The decision that whatever a man in that uniform had to say couldn't possibly be urgent. I'll see that it gets to the right people. The right person is her. Sir, let him through. The voice came from an open office door. Victoria Sterling stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Behind her, through the glass, Damien could see a conference room full of people mid-meeting. All of them turned to look. Your maintenance, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Damien Carter. And you have something urgent about my integration project that couldn't go through your supervisor. It did go through my supervisor. He agrees with me. I just didn't trust it to make it up all the floors before it stopped mattering. Something in her expression sharpened annoyance. Maybe curiosity, maybe both. Come in. You've got 2 minutes. I'm in the middle of something. The conference room went quiet when he walked in. There were 8 or 9 of them around the table, and Damien recognized a couple by sight, division heads, project leads. And at Victoria's right hand, leaning back in his chair, with the easy confidence of a man who had never once been told no, sat Richard Cole. Senior VP. The man whose name was on the integration contract. Everyone, Victoria said. This is Mr. Carter from Facilities. He has a safety concern. Mr. Carter, the floor is yours. 2 minutes. Damien didn't sit. He set the folder on the table and opened it and turned it so they could see. The new integration routes, primary load through junction 4C on sublevel 3. That junction is not rated for the load it's going to carry at full capacity. Under this timeline, it goes live before anyone stress tests it. If it fails, and I'm telling you it will fail, it takes the cooling system with it, and when the cooling goes, so does everything above it. Servers, client data, all of it. Silence. Then Richard Cole laughed. Not loud. Just a soft, dismissive exhale, the kind of laugh that was designed to make the person it was aimed at feel small. And you determined all this from the basement, Cole said. I determined it from the schematics, your schematics. I circled the junction in red, page 2. Mr. Carter. Cole folded his hands. We have an entire engineering team. We have consultants. We have signed off at every level. And you're telling this room that you, a maintenance technician, caught something that dozens of degreed engineers missed. I'm telling you what's in front of you on the page. You don't have to believe me. You have 3 weeks. Test the junction. If I'm wrong, you've lost a day. If I'm right, you've saved the whole company. We don't have a day, Cole said. The shareholder meeting is, then you don't have a system that works, Damien said. You just have one that hasn't failed yet. The room went very still. Victoria hadn't said a word. She was looking at the folder. Damien watched her eyes move across the schematic, watched them stop on the red circle, and for 1 second, just one, he thought he saw it land. He thought he saw her understand. Then Cole leaned toward her and said low, but not low enough, Victoria, this is exactly what I warned you about. Every timeline has a doomsayer. If we start chasing every worst-case scenario from every corner of this building, we'll never ship anything. This project is your first real test in front of the board. Don't let a man with a wrench turn it into a circus. And Damien watched the understanding leave her face. He watched her remember who she was supposed to be. Watched her remember she was young and untested and terrified of looking weak and surrounded by men waiting for her to blink. And he understood with a sinking certainty that he had just lost not because he was wrong, but because being right had become inconvenient at exactly the wrong moment. Mr. Carter, Victoria said, and her voice had changed. It had gone flat and cold and executive. I appreciate your diligence, but this project has been reviewed and approved by people whose job it is to review and approve it. The timeline stands. Ma'am, the timeline stands. Then at least test the junction. That's all I'm asking. One test. The answer is no. Damien stood there. He looked at the folder on the table, the red circle, the plain English line at the bottom that any one of them could have read. And he made a choice, the same choice he made every time it counted, the choice that had cost him raises and promotions, and easy years, the choice he would make again on his deathbed if he had to. Then I can't sign off on it, he said quietly. I won't put my name on something I know is going to fail. You can build it, but you'll build it without my signature, because my signature means I checked it, and it's not safe. Later, people who were in that room would tell the story differently, depending on where they sat. But everyone agreed on what happened next. Victoria Sterling stood up. She was not a tall woman, but she stood like the whole company was behind her, and maybe in that moment she believed it was. She looked at Damien across the table, a maintenance worker in a gray uniform who had just told the CEO of a billion-dollar company no in front of her senior staff, in front of the man she trusted most. And she said the words that would follow her for the rest of her life. Mr. Carter, in this company, we move forward together or we don't move forward at all. So let me be very clear. You follow my rules or you leave. The room held its breath. Every person at that table had seen this scene before. They knew how it went. The man in the uniform would swallow it. He'd apologize. He'd say, "Of course, Ms. Sterling, I misspoke. I only meant to help." He'd lower his head and shuffle back to the basement, grateful to still have a job, because that's what men in gray uniforms did when women in the corner office drew a line. That's what everyone expected. That's not what happened. Damien Carter reached up slow and unclipped the badge from his chest. He set it down on the glass table right next to the folder, right next to the red circle. He took his access card out of his pocket and laid it beside the badge, squared it up. Careful, the way a man puts down something he's finished with. There's my rules, he said. Simple ones. I don't lie about people's safety. And I don't put my name on a thing that's gonna hurt somebody so a couple men in this room can hit a deadline. He looked at Victoria, and there was no anger in it. That was the part that unsettled her most later when she replayed it 1,000 times. There was no rage. There was just a kind of tired, immovable dignity. The dignity of a man who had already lost more than a job and knew exactly what a job was worth. You said follow the rules or leave. He picked up his toolbox. I'm choosing leave. And he walked out. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Richard Cole opened his mouth and closed it again. And Victoria Sterling stood at the head of her table with her hands flat on the glass, looking down at a company badge and an access card lined up neat as soldiers. And for the first time since she'd taken her father's chair, she had the sick, disorienting feeling that she had just done something she could not take back. But she buried it. She was good at that. She looked around the table and made her face hard and said, "All right, where were we?" And the meeting went on. She told herself she had just fired a difficult employee. She had no idea she had just handed the only man who could save her company his toolbox and shown him the door. Damien rode the freight elevator down for the last time. He didn't feel triumphant. That was the thing nobody in that room would have understood. There was no swell of music in his chest, no righteous fire. There was just a plummeting, hollow fear growing bigger with every floor, because with every floor, he was closer to the ground, and the ground was where Lily was, and Lily needed the good cereal in the cabinet. And rent was due in 18 days, and he had just walked away from the only steady thing standing between his daughter and the version of the world he'd sworn she'd never have to see. Tom was waiting by the service door. "Word travels fast," Tom said. "Yeah." "You really put the badge on the table?" "Yeah." Tom exhaled and shook his head, half in disbelief, half in something that looked a lot like pride. "You crazy beautiful fool." "Probably." "You need anything, money, a place to—" "I'm okay, Tom." "You're not, but I appreciate you saying it." Tom gripped his shoulder hard. "Listen to me. That junction, that's still gonna blow. You know it, and I know it. And when it does, this whole tower is gonna come looking for the man who tried to warn them and got thrown out for it. You hear me? This isn't over. It's over for me." "No." Tom's grip tightened. "It's over for the man they think you are. It ain't even started for the man you actually are." Damien didn't understand what he meant. Not then. He just nodded because Tom was a good man, and the good ones deserved a nod. And he pushed through the service door out into the gray afternoon, with his toolbox in his hand and no job to go back to. He stood on the sidewalk for a minute. Just stood there, while the city went by, while men and women with places to be flowed around him like water around a stone. And he did the thing he always did when the fear got too big to carry. He thought about the promise. Whatever it costs. That little girl will never go without. He'd made that promise over a grave. He'd meant it. And now, standing on a cold sidewalk with his whole steady life behind a locked glass door, he understood that keeping the promise was going to be a lot harder tomorrow than it had been yesterday. Then he checked his watch. It was 2:50, and whatever else was falling apart, one thing wasn't going to change. He was going to be at that school at 3:30. He always was. Lily saw it on his face the second she got in the car. She was 7, but she wasn't stupid, and she had spent 3 years learning to read her father the way other kids learn to read books, because after her mother was gone, he was the whole weather system of her life, and you learn to watch the sky when the sky is all you've got. "Dad, what happened?" "Nothing happened, baby. How was the water cycle?" "You're doing the smile." "What smile?" "The one where your mouth smiles, but your eyes are somewhere else. You do it when something's wrong, and you don't want me to know." She crossed her arms. "So what's wrong?" Damien pulled the car over. He put it in park, and he turned to look at his daughter, and he made a decision he would think about for a long time afterward, the decision not to lie to her. Because he'd walked out of a building today rather than tell a lie, and it seemed like a poor kind of principle if it stopped at the office door and didn't make it home. "I left my job today," he said. Her eyes went wide. "You got fired?" "Not exactly. My boss asked me to do something I thought was wrong. Something that could have hurt people. And she told me I had to follow the rules or leave." He paused. "So I left." Lily was quiet for a second. He watched her work through it. Watched the fear come up in her because she was Marcus's classmate and Marcus's dad lost his job. And now there was no good cereal, and he braced himself for the tears, for the "how are we gonna be okay," for the weight of a child's fear landing on top of everything else. Instead, she said, "Was it really the wrong thing? What they wanted you to do?" "Yeah, baby, it was." "Would somebody have gotten hurt?" "Maybe. Yeah, maybe a lot of somebodies." Lily nodded slowly the way she did over her homework when a hard problem finally made sense. "Then you did the right thing," she said. And it broke something open in him right there in the parked car. This 7-year-old girl with one sock who'd just heard her whole world got less safe, and whose first instinct was, not "how does this hurt me," but "did my dad do right?" He had to look out the window for a second. He had to take a breath. "You're not scared?" he asked. "A little, but you always figure it out. You said worrying is your job, so I'm not gonna do your job for you." She reached over and patted his arm, this tiny hand on his forearm absolving him. "You always figure it out, Dad." "Yeah," he said, and his voice wasn't quite steady. "Yeah, I always do." He put the car back in drive, and as he pulled into traffic, one hand on the wheel and his daughter humming beside him. Damien Carter had no way of knowing that the badge he'd left on that glass table wasn't the end of his story. It was the first thing that had gone right in a long, long time. Because in 3 weeks, Junction 4C on Sublevel 3 was going to do exactly what he said it would do. And when it did, the whole gleaming tower was going to remember the quiet man in the gray uniform who tried to warn them, and the young CEO who told him to follow the rules or leave was going to learn the hard way that the most valuable person in her entire company had been the one she never bothered to see. But that was 3 weeks away. Tonight there was dinner to make, and a water cycle to finish, and a little girl to braid for in the morning. Tonight, a good man went home. The first week without a job, Damien did what he'd always done when the ground shifted under him. He got up at 4:40 anyway. There was no reason to. There was no freight elevator waiting, no cooling loop to check, no schematics to circle in red. But his body didn't know that, and honestly, neither did his pride. So he got up, and he made the coffee, and he scrambled the eggs soft, and he cut the toast into triangles, and when Lily wandered out with her hair a mess, he was standing at the counter like a man who still had somewhere to be. "You're up early again," she said. "I'm always up early, but you don't have work." "I've got the most important work there is." He set the plate in front of her. "Getting you to school with your homework done and your hair not looking like a bird slept in it. Sit down." She sat, she ate, and she watched him over the rim of her juice glass with that too old look she got sometimes, the one that made him forget she was 7. "Marcus's dad stayed in bed," she said, "after he lost his job. Marcus said he didn't get up for like a whole week. Well, Marcus's dad and I are different men." "How come you got up?" Damien thought about it. He didn't give her the easy answer. He'd promised himself he wouldn't give her easy answers because easy answers were just small lies wearing nice clothes. "Because the day you let the bad thing decide when you get out of bed," he said, "is the day the bad thing wins. And I don't lose to bad things, not while you're watching. Eat your eggs." He walked her to Mrs. Alvarez's, and he braided her hair on the doorstep, because he hadn't gotten to it quick, clean fingers working through it, while she stood patient and still. And Mrs. Alvarez watched from the door with her arms crossed and something soft in her face. "You heard yet?" she asked him quietly over Lily's head. "Heard what?" "Marisol's boy works security in that building of yours. Says the whole floor's talking about the maintenance man who told off the new CEO and walked out. Says they're calling you a legend down in the basement. They're calling me unemployed down in my kitchen." "Damien." She reached out and touched his arm. "You did a hard thing. Don't let him make you feel small for it." "I don't feel small." He finished the braid, tied it off, patted Lily's shoulder. "I feel scared. There's a difference. You can be scared and still be right. Go on, baby bus is coming." Lily ran, and Mrs. Alvarez watched her go, and then she looked back at Damien. "You need money, you tell me. I got a little put by. You've got 3 grandkids and a bad hip, Rosa. I'm not taking your money." Stubborn. "That's what everybody keeps telling me." He went home. And then he did the thing that scared him more than the CEO, more than the empty schedule, more than any of it. He opened his laptop and he started looking for work. He was good. He knew he was good. 12 years of experience, certifications. Most of the men upstairs couldn't have passed a working knowledge of systems. The consultants got paid $300 an hour to pretend to understand. On paper, he should have had 10 offers by Friday. But paper was the problem. Because on paper, Damian Carter's last 12 years said maintenance technician, and the men who read paper for a living didn't read past those two words. He applied to 19 places that first week. He heard back from 4. 3 were automatic rejections. The 4th was a phone screen with a hiring manager named Dell, who talked to him for 6 minutes and spent 5 of them explaining why Damian was overqualified for the jobs he'd take and underqualified on paper for the jobs he could actually do. See, the thing is, Dell said, a company sees maintenance and a certain salary history, they get nervous about bringing you in higher. It's a box thing. You're outside the box. I've spent 12 years keeping billion-dollar systems from catching fire. That's the box I'm in. I hear you. I do. It's just the way the software sorts it. The software. The software filters on job titles. Yours says maintenance. So it never gets me to the good part, where you keep things from catching fire. A pause. Between you and me, it's a broken system. But it's the system. Damian thanked him and hung up and sat at his kitchen table for a long time looking at the drawing on the refrigerator. Lily had made it in kindergarten. It was him, a stick figure in gray, with a triangle for a toolbox, and under it, in the wobbly letters of a 5-year-old, she'd written, "My dad fixes everything." "Not everything, baby," he said out loud to nobody. "Turns out, I can't fix a broken system." He almost laughed at that. Almost. Then he closed the laptop and went to pick up his daughter because it was 3 o'clock and some systems he could still keep running by hand. Up in the glass tower, meanwhile, Victoria Sterling was learning that a system doesn't have to fail all at once to start telling you the truth. It started small. It always started small. 9 days after she'd told a maintenance worker to follow the rules or leave a monitoring alert, flagged an irregularity in the cooling loop on sublevel 3. Minor. A temperature reading a few degrees off, corrected within the hour. The kind of thing that happened. Her operations director mentioned it in the Monday meeting, waved it off, moved on. 2 days later, it happened again. Same loop. Same few degrees. Corrected again. The third time it wasn't a few degrees, and it didn't correct on its own, and a technician had to go down and reset a junction by hand, and the integration test that was supposed to run that afternoon had to be pushed a day. Pushed a day. Victoria repeated in the meeting, and the whole table went quiet because she'd said it in the flat voice, the one they'd all learned to be afraid of. "We're 3 weeks from the shareholder presentation, and we're pushing tests a day at a time. Somebody explain that to me." "It's a calibration issue," her operations director said. "The new sensors are sensitive. We're getting false." "Is it false, or is something actually running hot down there?" "We're looking into it. Look faster." Richard Cole leaned back in his chair, easy as always. "Victoria, this is normal. Every major integration has teething problems. You commission a new system, it complains for a couple weeks, then it settles. If we jumped every time a sensor blinked, we'd never ship anything. We're on track." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him, because Richard had been her father's man for 20 years, because Richard had stood at her elbow through every terrifying week since she took the chair and told her she was doing fine, told her she belonged there, told her the doubters were just doubters. She needed one person in that building who thought she could do this. Richard was that person, but she'd been raised by an engineer, whatever else her father had been, and something at the back of her mind wouldn't lie down. "What's on sub-level 3? She asked. "Ma'am, the cooling loop that keeps hiccuping. What's it routed through? Show me the schematic." The room shifted. She felt it. A small, uncomfortable shift, like everyone had suddenly found something interesting on their legal pads. "I don't have it in front of me," the operations director said. "Then get it." They got it. And that afternoon, alone in her office with the door closed, Victoria Sterling spread the schematic of sub-level 3 across her desk and made herself read it the way her father had taught her to read a drawing when she was 12 years old, before she ever wanted the company back, when she just wanted to sit in his lap and understand what the lines meant. She followed the primary load. She followed it across the page through the routing down into the junctions, and she stopped at a spot on sub-level 3, a junction labeled 4C, and she felt the floor tilt very slightly under her. Because she'd seen this before. Not the drawing. The junction. The red circle. She'd seen it circled in red on a folder on her own conference table, held by a man in a gray uniform she'd thrown out of the building. "No," she said quietly. "No, no, no." She pulled up the file system. She searched for it, any report, any memo, anything with the words the man had used. And she found it. A single document submitted 3 weeks earlier, flagged urgent, then buried under an approval override. She opened it. She read it. She read the plain English line at the bottom, the one written so nobody could pretend they hadn't understood it, and then she read it again. "This system is not safe to go live on the current timeline. Recommend immediate review before proceeding." The report was signed, Damien Carter, and attached to it, she scrolled her heart, going strange in her chest. Attached to it was the same schematic on her desk. Junction 4, C, circled in red. With a handwritten note beside it, scanned in, "Not rated for full load. Will fail under commissioning stress. Route around before go live." He'd told her. He'd stood in her conference room and told her exactly this. And she'd told him to follow the rules or leave, and Richard Cole had laughed, and she'd let him laugh. And now the junction the man circled in red was the junction that had been running hot for a week and a half. She sat very still. And then she did something she hadn't done in her office in the 8 months she'd run the company. She picked up the phone and called Richard Cole and asked him to come to her office right now. And when he arrived easy and smiling, she didn't ask him to sit. "Richard, the cooling loop on sub-level 3. It's routed through junction 4C. Is it? I'd have to check." It is. I have the schematic on my desk, and I have a report from 3 weeks ago that says junction 4C isn't rated for the load and is going to fail under commissioning stress." She turned her monitor toward him. "That's what's been running hot for 10 days, Richard. That's not a sensor calibration. That's exactly what this report said would happen." Richard glanced at the screen. His face didn't change, and later, that would matter to her, the fact that his face didn't change, because a man surprised by bad news looks surprised, and Richard didn't. "Where'd you dig this up?" "It's in our own system. It was submitted through channels and flagged urgent, and then somebody buried it under an override." She watched him. "Do you know who buried it?" "Victoria, come on." He spread his hands. "You get 100 of these. Every technician in the building thinks the sky is falling on his little corner of the system. If we chase down every doomsday memo from every..." This one was right. "We don't know that. It's been running hot for 10 days, Richard. It said it would run hot, and it's running hot." At what point does "we don't know that" stop being a thing you get to say? For just a second, something flickered under Richard Cole's easy face. She saw it. She didn't have a name for it yet, but she saw it, and it made her cold. "Who signed this report?" she asked. He knew. She could tell he knew, but he made her say it. "Damien Carter," she said. "The maintenance worker. The one you told me was a doomsayer with a wrench. The one I threw out of this building in front of my entire senior staff because you leaned over and told me not to let a man with a wrench turn my first big project into a circus." Her voice had gone very quiet. "You knew about this report." "I knew there was a report. There are always reports." "You knew what it said." "Victoria, get out of my office." He stood there a second, recalibrating. She watched him decide how to play it. He decided on wounded loyalty. "I have given 20 years to this company," he said. "To your father. To you. And you're going to take the word of a signature on a memo over. I'm going to take the word of a junction that's been running hot for 10 days. Exactly like the memo said. Get out. I need to think." He got out. And Victoria Sterling sat alone in her office with the schematic on her desk and the report on her screen and a cold, dawning understanding spreading through her. And the understanding was this. She had made the biggest mistake of her short career, And she'd made it because she'd wanted so badly to look strong that she'd thrown away the one man in the building who tried to keep her from looking like a fool. She started reading, not just the one report, everything. She pulled Damien Carter's whole file, 12 years of it, and she sat there past dark, past the time the cleaning crew came through, past the time the tower emptied out and the city lit up below her window, reading about a man she'd known for 2 minutes and dismissed in 1. And what she found didn't make sense, because the file said maintenance technician. But the file also said, if you read the old parts, the parts from before, that Damien Carter had come to Sterling Technologies 12 years ago, not as maintenance, but as a junior systems engineer. A promising one. There were performance reviews from those first 2 years that used words like exceptional and original and the kind of mind we build companies around. There was a note faded in the record that he'd been on a fast track, that her father personally had flagged him as one to watch. And then abruptly, 6 months in, the record changed. The engineering title went away. The maintenance title appeared. The salary dropped. And from that point on for 10 years, Damien Carter had quietly kept the physical systems of the company running and never once appeared on a promotion list again. Something had happened. Something had knocked a fast-track engineer down to the basement and left him there for a decade. And the file didn't say what. Victoria found the answer 3 days later, and it wasn't in a file. It was in a person. His name was Walter Briggs, and he was 71 years old and long retired, and he'd run engineering at Sterling for 30 years, and Victoria tracked him down because his was one of the names on those early glowing reviews. She called him. She told him who she was. She told him she was trying to understand something about a man named Damien Carter. There was a long silence on the phone. "Now there's a name I didn't expect to hear," Walter said. "How is Damien? I was hoping you could tell me about him. His file doesn't, there's a gap. He came in as an engineer, a good one, and then 12 years ago something happened and he ended up in maintenance and stayed there. I can't find what happened." "You won't find it," Walter said. "It's not in any file. Your father made sure of that. What do you want to know for?" She hesitated. And then, because she was tired, and because she'd been carrying this alone, she told the truth. "Because I made a mistake, Mr. Briggs. He tried to warn me about something, and I threw him out of the building. And now the thing he warned me about is happening, and I'm trying to understand who I threw away." Another long silence. And then, Walter Briggs sighed the sigh of an old man deciding to open a door he'd kept shut a long time. "You got an hour," he said. "Because this isn't a short story and it's not a nice one, and when I'm done, you're going to feel worse than you do now. But you should hear it. Somebody in that building should finally hear it." "I've got an hour. 12 years ago," Walter said, "we had a project, big one, career-making, company-making. And we had a young engineer, 23 years old, sharp as anybody I ever worked with in 30 years. Damien Carter. And 3 weeks before we shipped, that kid came into my office white as a sheet and told me the whole thing was going to fail. Said there was a flaw in the core design. Said it would hold in testing and blow in the field. And he was so sure and so scared that I believed him. What happened? I took it up the chain, and the chain didn't want to hear it because the chain had promised the board a ship date. Sound familiar? Victoria closed her eyes. Yes. There was a man above me, ambitious. His bonus was tied to that ship date. And he did a very clever, very quiet thing. He didn't argue with Damien. He just made sure Damien's warning never reached the people who could act on it. Buried it. And then when it looked like the kid wouldn't let it go, he made the kid the problem. Said Damien was unstable, difficult, not a team player. Poisoned the well so thorough that by the time it mattered, nobody upstairs would take a call from him. "Who was the man?" Victoria asked, though something in her already knew. "You sure you want that name?" "Who was it, Mr. Briggs?" "Richard Cole," Walter said. "He was a rising VP then. He's a senior one now, I hear. He's still there, isn't he?" Victoria couldn't answer for a second. "He's still here," she said finally. "Course he is. Men like that always are." Walter's voice was heavy. "So, we shipped the project. On time. Just like the board wanted. And you know what happened. It failed. It failed. In the field, exactly the way that 23-year-old kid said it would, right down to the component. It cost the company a fortune, and it cost something worse than money, because when a system like that fails, sometimes people get hurt, and this time somebody did. Not badly, thank God, but badly enough. And Damien, here's the part that'll keep you up nights. Walter's voice dropped. When it all came apart, and they went looking for someone to blame. Richard Cole pointed at Damien, said the kid had signed off on the design. And there was a signature, Damien's signature, on an early document from before he ever found the flaw. Cole waved that signature around and buried the warning report where nobody would look. And just like that, the boy who'd tried to save the company became the boy who'd broken it. "That's a lie," Victoria whispered. "You knew it was a lie. Why didn't you?" "I tried. I went to your father. And your father, Victoria. I'm going to tell you something about your father, and you're not going to like it. But you asked. Your father knew. Your father looked at all of it and understood that Damien was innocent and Cole was the problem. And your father made a business decision. Cole was connected. Cole brought in clients. Cleaning up the truth meant a scandal, meant admitting the company shipped a product it knew was flawed. And Damien was 23 years old, with no power and no allies. Walter paused. So your father made it quiet. He didn't fire Damien. Firing him would have raised questions. He offered him a choice instead. Stay quietly off the engineering track, no more trouble. Keep your head down and your job. Or leave with the blame following you everywhere you'd ever apply. Victoria felt sick, and he stayed. He stayed. And you want to know why he stayed? Because 2 months before all this, that boy had gotten married, and his wife was pregnant, and a young black engineer with a failed project and a whisper campaign following his name. You think that man gets another job in this industry? He does not. He knew it. So he swallowed a lie that wasn't his, and he took the basement and he kept his family fed. He traded his whole future for a steady paycheck because he had a baby coming and no other way to protect her. Walter's voice cracked just slightly. I watched the best young engineer I ever trained spend 10 years fixing air conditioners because a man like Richard Cole needed somebody to blame, and your father decided the truth was too expensive. And I retired 2 years later because I couldn't look at it anymore. So there. Now you know. Feel worse? Yes, Victoria said. Her voice was barely there. I feel worse. Good, you should. And then gentler. But feeling worse isn't worth a damn thing by itself, young lady. Your father had the same information I'm giving you now, and all he did with it was feel bad and keep quiet. Question is whether you're going to be your father, or whether you're going to be something better. Because that man is still down in your basement, or he was till you threw him out carrying a lie that belongs to Richard Cole. And you're the only person alive with the power to give it back to the man it belongs to. Victoria didn't sleep that night. She sat up in her apartment, 32 years old, running a company she'd inherited from a father she'd just discovered she didn't fully know, and she thought about a man in a gray uniform who had set a badge down on her conference table without a word. She'd thought he was proud. She'd thought he was stubborn. She'd thought he was a problem. He wasn't any of those things. He was a man who had been punished 12 years ago for doing exactly what he'd done in her conference room 3 weeks ago, telling the truth to people who didn't want to hear it. And instead of learning from what happened to him, instead of protecting himself, instead of finally keeping his head down after a decade of consequences, he'd walked into her conference room and done it again. Knowing what it cost the last time. Knowing what it might cost now with a daughter at home and rent due. He'd done the right thing twice, 12 years apart, and both times this company had thrown him away for it. She thought about her father saying the truth was too expensive, and she thought sitting there in the dark, not this time. The next morning, she called her operations director before the sun was up. Shut down the commissioning test on sub-level 3. Now, today. I don't care about the timeline. Ma'am, the shareholder. I don't care about the shareholder meeting. If that junction fails during commissioning, we don't have a shareholder meeting. We have a disaster and a lawsuit, and maybe somebody in a hospital. Shut it down. Route around Junction 4C exactly the way the Carter report specifies. It's in the system. Read it. Do what it says. That'll add 3 weeks minimum to, then it adds 3 weeks. Do it. She hung up. And then she sat with her coffee going cold and understood that shutting down the test was the easy part. The easy part was fixing the machine. The hard part was the man. Because a badge on a table wasn't something you undid with a phone call. She'd humiliated him in front of his peers. She'd repeated word for word the exact injustice this company had done to him 12 years before, and she couldn't fix it from behind a glass desk on the 18th floor. She'd have to go to him. She'd have to find him and stand in front of him with nothing but the truth and an apology, and she had no idea if he'd even open the door. She pulled his address from the file. She looked at it for a long time. It was in a part of the city she'd never had a reason to go. And down in that part of the city, at that same hour, Damian Carter was standing at his kitchen counter, making the coffee and scrambling the eggs soft, because it was 4:40 in the morning, and his body still didn't know he was out of a job. Lily wandered out in her pajamas, one sock on and one sock gone, the way she always was. "You're up early," she said the way she always said. "I'm always up early." He set the plate down. "Sit, eat, big day, science fair right. Tomorrow. Today's just regular." She climbed into the chair and looked at him with that too old look. "Dad, did you find a job yet?" He didn't lie to her. He'd promised himself. "Not yet, baby. But I'm looking. Something'll turn up." Marcus's dad said that too, for a long time. Marcus's dad and I are different men, remember. How are you different? Damian leaned on the counter and looked at his daughter, this small, serious person who watched him like the weather, and he gave her the truest thing he had. "Marcus's dad quit looking," he said. "I don't quit. I have never once quit on anything that mattered, and you are the thing that matters most. So I promise you I will knock on every door in this city before I stop. You hear me? I don't quit." She studied him a second, and then she nodded satisfied and went back to her eggs. "Okay," she said. "Then we're okay." Then we're okay. He didn't know it standing there, but a woman in a black car was already pulling out of a garage 18 floors below the sky with his address written on a piece of paper on the seat beside her, driving toward a part of the city she'd never seen, toward a small apartment with a child's drawing on the refrigerator, toward the man she'd thrown away, and the truth she was finally 12 years too late coming to give back. He poured himself the coffee. He looked at the drawing on the fridge, the stick figure in gray. My dad fixes everything. And for the first time in 9 days, he let himself believe just a little that maybe something was about to turn. He was right. He just had no idea how far it would turn, or what it would cost, or who was about to knock on his door. The knock came at 9 in the morning, and Damian almost didn't answer it. He'd just gotten back from dropping Lily at Mrs. Alvarez's, and he was standing at the kitchen table with the laptop open and a list of 5 more places to apply to, and when the knock came, his first thought was that it was the landlord, because the only people who knocked on his door in the morning were people who wanted something from him. So he braced himself the way you brace for a bill, and he opened the door, and Victoria Sterling was standing in his hallway in a coat that cost more than his car. For a second, neither of them said anything. She looked wrong there. That was his first thought. She looked like a photograph that had been cut out of one magazine and pasted into another, all that expensive fabric, standing in a hallway with a water stain on the ceiling and a bicycle chained to the radiator 2 doors down. She looked like she knew she looked wrong there too, and was making herself stand still anyway. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Ms. Sterling." His voice gave away nothing. 12 years of keeping his head down had taught him that much. "You're a long way from the 18th floor." "I am. Can I know I have no right to ask. Can I come in 10 minutes? That's all." He didn't move out of the doorway. "How'd you get my address?" "Your file." "My file." Something hardened in his face. "So the company that couldn't be bothered to know my name for 10 years suddenly knows where I live. That's fair? It's not fair. Fair would be you not being here, but you are here, so I'll ask you straight, what do you want?" And Victoria Sterling, who had rehearsed a dozen versions of this in the car, who had a whole careful speech built to keep her dignity intact, threw all of it out and just told him the truth right there in the hallway with the door half open between them. "You were right," she said. "About the junction. It's been running hot for 10 days exactly like your report said. I found your report. I read it. And then I read everything else, and I know what Richard Cole did to you 12 years ago. And I came here to tell you that I know and to say I'm sorry. And I don't expect it to mean anything, because sorry is cheap and you've heard it before from people who owed you a lot more than sorry. But I couldn't do it over the phone. I owed you a door. So, there it is." Damien stood very still. Of everything she could have said, that was the one thing he hadn't armored himself against. He'd been ready for her to offer him money. He'd been ready for her to try to buy his silence, or worse, to threaten him. He was not ready for her to stand in his hallway and say the name Richard Cole and 12 years ago in the same breath, because there were maybe 4 people alive who knew what those words meant strung together, and he'd been carrying them alone for so long that hearing them out loud from a stranger nearly took his knees. "Who told you?" he said. Quiet, dangerous, quiet. Walter Briggs. Damien closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in his face had changed. "Walter's alive. 71 and angry. He talked to me for an hour. He told me all of it, the project, the flaw, Cole burying your warning, the failure, the blame. He told me what my father offered you." Her voice caught just slightly. "He told me you took the basement so your wife and your baby would eat. And he told me I should feel worse than I do. And I do, Mr. Carter. I feel a lot worse than I do." Damien looked at her for a long moment. And then he stepped back from the door. 10 minutes, he said. "And keep your voice down. My daughter draws on those walls and I don't want her hearing any of this when she gets home." She came in. She stood in the middle of his small living room, and he watched her take it in. Not sneering. He'd have thrown her out for sneering, but taking it in the worn couch and the kitchen table, doubling as a desk, and the drawings all over the refrigerator. He watched her eyes land on the stick figure in gray. "My dad fixes everything." He watched her read it, and he watched something move across her face that he couldn't name and didn't trust yet. "Sit," he said. "You've got a coat that costs more than my rent, you might as well use my couch." She sat. He didn't. He stayed standing, arms crossed, because a man learns to keep his feet under him when a Sterling is in the room. "Say what you came to say," he told her. "I already said the important part. You were right, and I'm sorry." She looked up at him. "But I didn't just come to apologize. I came because I need your help, and I know how that sounds. I know exactly how that sounds. I threw you out of the building, and now I'm sitting on your couch asking for help. You can throw me out. I'd understand. I'm thinking about it. I know. But before you do, the junction's the least of it. I shut the test down. I'm routing around 4C like your report says. That part's just engineering. I can fix that. The problem is bigger than the junction." She leaned forward. "The problem is, Richard Cole is still in my building. He buried your report 3 weeks ago, the same way he buried it 12 years ago. Same move, same man. And he's got his hands on the whole integration contract, and I'm starting to think the timeline pressure isn't coming from where I was told it's coming from. I think Richard's been pushing this deal for a reason that has nothing to do with the company. And I can't prove it because he's spent 20 years making sure the paper always points somewhere else. He's good at it. You know how good he is. You've got the scars." Damien didn't say anything for a while. He walked to the window and looked out at the street at the ordinary morning, at a world that had spent 12 years believing a lie about him. "You want to know something?" he said, not turning around. "For 10 years I told myself I made peace with it. Took the basement, kept my head down, told myself it didn't matter. Told myself the only thing that mattered was Lily eating and the rent getting paid. And I believed it mostly. You can believe almost anything if a child's depending on you to keep it together." He turned around. "And then 3 weeks ago I stood in your conference room and I felt it all over again. 23 years old, standing in a room full of people who'd already decided I was wrong before I opened my mouth. Same feeling. Exact same feeling. And I thought, not again. I am not doing this again. I am not swallowing another lie so a man like Cole can hit a number. And I put the badge down. He shook his head. Cost me my job. But it was the first time in 12 years I felt like myself. And I'm the one who made you choose. Victoria said quietly. I said follow the rules or leave. You did. I'm ashamed of that. I want you to know that. I've said a lot of things in that chair trying to look like I belonged in it, and that's the one I can't stop hearing. Damien studied her, and something in him, the part that had spent 12 years reading people, reading executives, learning the difference between the ones performing decency and the ones actually feeling it, something in him decided she wasn't performing. Why do you care? He asked. Honest question. Your father didn't. Your father knew every bit of what Cole did, and he made it quiet because the truth was expensive. Walter tell you that too? He told me. So it runs in the family, burying inconvenient men in basements. Why are you different? And Victoria Sterling looked at the man she'd wronged and gave him the truest answer she had, the one she hadn't even known was true, until she said it out loud. Because I didn't know, she said. My father knew and buried it anyway. That's a choice, and I have to live with the fact that he made it, and that his money paid for my whole life. But I didn't know. And now I do. And I've figured out that the only thing worse than a man who buries the truth to protect himself is a person who finds the truth already dug up sitting right in front of her and buries it again, because fixing it is hard. Her voice was steady now. I'm not going to be that person. I don't care what it costs. I've spent 8 months trying to prove I deserve that chair. Turns out, I don't get to deserve it by looking strong in meetings. I get to deserve it by doing the one thing my father wouldn't. So that's why I care, Mr. Carter. Because I'd rather lose the company doing right than keep it doing what he did. The apartment was quiet. Damien Carter had spent 12 years waiting for someone with power to say something like that. And he'd long ago stopped believing he'd ever hear it. And now here it was on his worn couch in a coat that cost more than his rent. And the strange thing, the thing that undid him a little, was that it didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief. Because it was 12 years too late for the young man he'd been, and nothing she said could give that man his career back, or unmake the decade in the basement. But it wasn't too late for the man he was now, and it wasn't too late for Lily's father to stop carrying a lie. Sit down's over, he said. You can stand up now. I'll help you. She looked up startled. You will. I've got conditions, but yeah, I'll help you. He finally sat across from her elbows on his knees. First condition. This isn't about my job. I'm not doing this to get hired back. If you offer me my old badge as payment for this, I'll walk you to the door myself. Understand I'm not for sale. I never was. That was always the thing Cole and your father never understood about me. They thought a man in the basement was a man who'd been bought. I wasn't bought. I was cornered. There's a difference. There's a difference, she agreed. Understood. What else? Second condition. When we take down Cole, and we're going to take him down, not embarrass him, take him down, we do it clean, with evidence. The right way. Because if we do it dirty, if we cut a corner to get him faster, then we're just Cole with better intentions. And I've spent 12 years watching what good intentions with cut corners do to people. We do it clean, or we don't do it. Clean, she said. Yes. Third condition. And here his voice changed, went lower, went to the place that mattered most. My daughter never becomes part of this. Not a headline, not a photo, not a sad story about the single dad in the basement who got vindicated. If this turns into a circus, and my little girl becomes the emotional hook of somebody's press release, I'm done, no matter how far in we are. She's not a prop. She's a person. She's the whole reason I'm still standing. She stays out of it completely. She stays out of it, Victoria said. I give you my word. Your word. Damien almost smiled. 3 weeks ago, your word was follow the rules or leave. I know. I'm asking you to let me be worth more than my worst sentence." She held his eyes. "You're a man who did the right thing twice, 12 years apart, and got punished both times. I'm asking you to do it a third time, and I'm promising you that this time I'll be standing next to you when the room turns cold. I won't lean back and let somebody bury you. Not again. That's my word, and I know it's not worth much yet, but it's what I've got, and I mean to make it worth something." Damien sat with that, and then he stood, and he held out his hand, and she stood and took it, and they shook the CEO and the man she'd thrown away in a small living room under a drawing that said, "My dad fixes everything." "Okay," Damien said. "Then let's go dig up the truth. But I'm telling you now, Cole's had 12 years and a lot of practice at burying it. It's going to be down deep." They started that afternoon at his kitchen table because he wouldn't set foot in the building yet, and she understood why. And it turned out, Damien Carter had been quietly digging for 12 years, without ever calling it that. You have to understand how a man survives 10 years in a basement he doesn't belong in. He told her, pulling a battered accordion folder out of a closet. "You keep records, not because you think anybody'll ever listen, because it's the only way to stay sane. Every time I saw Cole cut a corner, every time I fixed something that shouldn't have broken, every time a system failed the way I'd predicted, and got written up as an accident, I kept a copy. Dates, photos, my own notes. Nobody ever asked to see them, but I kept them because a man's got to hold on to proof that he's not crazy, that he's not the problem, that the problem is the men upstairs who keep breaking things and blaming the guy with the wrench." Victoria stared at the folder. "How much is in there?" 12 years. He set it on the table. 12 years of watching Richard Cole cut corners and land on his feet. "It won't prove the old thing, the project that ruined me. That's mostly Cole's word against a dead paper trail. But it'll prove the pattern. And the new thing, the junction, the timeline that's fresh. That's still bleeding. If Cole did what I think he did on this contract, there'll be a trail because he's gotten arrogant. Men like him always do. 12 years of getting away with it, and you stop being careful." She was already pulling documents out, spreading them across the table where the eggs had been that morning. "This is Mr. Carter. This is incredible. This is exactly what I couldn't get from inside. Everybody inside protects Cole because Cole's been there longer than any of them, and he decides who gets promoted. Nobody would talk to me. They'll talk to you now. Once the junction fails to fail, once you route around it, and the disaster you were all racing toward, just quietly doesn't happen. Some of them are going to start wondering how you knew. And a few of them, the honest ones, the ones like Tom Reyes, they've been sitting on things for years, same as me. They just needed one person up top they could trust." He looked at her. "You give them that person, they'll come out of the woodwork. There's more honest people in that building than you think. They're just scared. Cole taught them to be scared. Watching what he did to me was the lesson. They worked until it was time to get Lily." And that was the moment Victoria would think later that everything changed for her. Not the folder, not the evidence, but what happened at 2:50, when Damien Carter looked at his watch and all the intensity went out of him at once. And he said, "That's it. We're done for today. We're just getting somewhere. I pick my daughter up at 3:30, every day. I have never once been late." He was already stacking the papers, sliding them back in the folder. "You can come back tomorrow, but right now I've got the only appointment I don't break." "Of course. I'm sorry. I'll go." But he stopped at the door with the folder under his arm and looked at her, and something in him unbent just a little. "You want to understand who you threw out of your building," he said. "Come with me. Not into her life, you stay in the car. You don't meet her, she stays out of it. Like I said, but you can watch. You can see the thing I chose the basement over. Because your father offered me a career if I'd stay quiet, and I said no. And everybody in that building spent 12 years thinking I was a fool for it. Come see what I said yes to instead." She rode in his old car through a part of the city she'd never seen, and she stayed in the passenger seat like he told her. And she watched Damien Carter stand outside an elementary school at 3:30. Exactly. and she watched a little girl with one sock always somehow going missing come tearing across the yard yelling, "Dad!" like he was the best thing that had ever happened to anybody. And she watched him catch her and swing her up and listen. Really listen, head bent, completely present to some enormous story about the science fair. And she understood something she hadn't understood in 8 months of running a billion-dollar company. She understood what her father had actually taken from this man. Not a career. Careers were replaceable. Her father had taken 12 years of a man being told he was worth less than he was. 12 years of a good man swallowing a lie. So this exact moment, this kid, this yard, this sock could keep happening. And the man had paid it, gladly, without complaint. And her family had gotten rich partly on the back of that silence. She was crying in the passenger seat when he got back in the car, and she was furious at herself for it, and she wiped it away fast. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine. Something in my eye." "Uh-huh." He didn't push it. He started the car. In the back seat, Lily was buckling herself in, and then she noticed the woman in the front and went instantly cautiously quiet the way kids do around strangers. "Dad, who's that?" "That's Ms. Sterling, baby. We're working on something together. She was just leaving." "Is she your new boss?" And Damien Carter looked at Victoria Sterling, and something almost like humor crossed his face the first she'd seen from him. "No," he said. "She's not my boss. I don't think I've got a boss anymore. But she's—" He paused, choosing it carefully because he didn't lie to his daughter. "She's somebody who did a wrong thing and came all the way across the city to try and make it right. That's rarer than you'd think, Lily. Most people who do wrong things just hope you forget." Lily considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old judge. "Did you say sorry?" she asked Victoria directly. Victoria turned around in her seat. "I did. A big one." "Did you mean it?" "Yes." "Then it's okay." Lily nodded, case closed, and went back to her backpack. "Dad says everybody does a wrong thing sometimes. He says the only thing that matters is what you do after." Victoria looked at Damien. He was watching the road, but his jaw had tightened, and she understood she'd just heard in a 7-year-old's voice the entire moral code of the man beside her passed down clean to the next generation. "Your dad's a smart man," she said quietly. "I know," said Lily. "He fixes everything." They dropped Victoria at a corner where she'd left her car, and before she got out, she turned to Damien one more time. "Tomorrow," she said. Same time, after 9 before 3. Those are my hours now." He almost smiled again. "Turns out unemployment's got a flexible schedule. Mr. Carter." She paused with her hand on the door. "The junction when we route around it, and the failure doesn't happen. Cole's going to know something changed. He's going to know somebody read your report. He's smart. He's going to come looking, and when he figures out it's you and it's me, he's going to fight. Dirty. The way he fought 12 years ago. I need you to be ready for that. Ms. Sterling?" Damien's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I've been ready for that for 12 years. The only thing that's different now is that this time I'm not fighting him alone in a basement. This time somebody up top's fighting next to me." He looked at her. "Don't lean back. That's all I ask. When the room turns cold, and it will, don't lean back and let him bury me. You do that, we win. You do that, this whole thing works." "I won't lean back," she said. "I promise you. I will not lean back." She got out. She watched his old car pull away with a good man at the wheel and a little girl in the back, and she stood on the corner in her expensive coat and understood that she'd come to his door that morning to fix a mistake, and she was leaving it, having found something else entirely, a partner and a conscience and a fight worth having, and the first true measure she'd ever taken of what leadership actually cost. Then she got in her own car and drove back toward the tower, toward Richard Cole, toward the truth that had been buried for 12 years and was finally about to come up out of the ground. They routed around Junction 4C on a Thursday, and the disaster that had been racing toward Sterling Technologies for 3 weeks simply, quietly did not happen. That was the strange thing about doing it right. When you fix a thing before it breaks, there's no moment. No alarm, no smoke, no crisis meeting. The junction that had been running hot for 10 days went cool. The commissioning test that had been failing a day at a time ran clean. And to everyone in the building who didn't know what had almost happened, it looked like nothing at all, which was exactly the problem, because the people who most needed to understand what Damien Carter had saved them from would never feel the weight of a catastrophe that didn't arrive. But one man understood immediately. Richard Cole came into Victoria's office without knocking, which he'd been doing for 20 years and had never once been told not to, and he set a printout on her desk and said, "Somebody rerouted the primary load off 4C without my sign-off, on a contract I run." "I rerouted it," Victoria said. She didn't look up. "It was going to fail. It's fixed now." It wasn't going to fail. It was a calibration. It was running hot for 10 days, exactly like the report said it would. "Richard, and now it's not because we did what the report told us to do 3 weeks ago. So it's fixed. You're welcome." Cole was quiet for a moment, and Victoria, who had spent 8 months reading this man as a mentor, and had only just started reading him as an adversary, made herself look up and watch his face, because Damien had told her watch him when the ground shifts under him. That's when you see who he really is. And what she saw was a man doing math. Not surprise. Not relief that a disaster had been averted. Math. He was calculating who could have read that report, who had the access, who had the motive, and how much trouble he was in. "Who told you to look at that report?" Cole asked. "Casual. Too casual." "Does it matter?" "It matters because that report came from a man I had to let go for insubordination. A man who put his badge on your conference table and walked out. And now 3 weeks later, his buried report resurfaces, and you're rerouting my contracts around it." Cole smiled, and it was the smile of a man laying down a card he'd held for years. "Victoria, I need to say this as somebody who loved your father. Be careful who you listen to. Damien Carter has a history. 12 years ago, he was part of the worst product failure this company ever had. He signed off on a flawed design and people got hurt. Your father, God rest him, was generous enough to keep him on quietly instead of destroying his career. And this is the man whose reports you're now treating as gospel." There it was, the exact move. 12 years apart, the same move delivered in the same reasonable, wounded, loyal voice. Make the honest man the problem. Bury the truth under his character. Victoria felt something cold and clarifying settle over her, because she'd read about this move in Walter Briggs's telling, and now she was watching it happen live, aimed at the same target, and it was somehow worse to see it than to hear about it. She could have swung right then. She had the folder. She had Walter's testimony. She wanted more than she'd wanted anything in 8 months to stand up and tell Richard Cole she knew exactly what he'd done 12 years ago, and exactly what he'd done 3 weeks ago, and watch his face come apart. But she remembered her second promise to Damien. "We do it clean, with evidence, the right way, or we don't do it." And swinging now on instinct with half the picture was exactly the dirty corner he'd warned her about. So she did the hardest thing she'd done since taking the chair. She swallowed it. "You may be right," she said, keeping her voice mild. "I'll keep it in mind. But the junction's fixed either way, and that's what matters this week." "Thank you, Richard." Cole studied her a beat longer, not quite satisfied, and then he picked up his printout and left. And the second the door closed, Victoria let out a breath she'd been holding and reached for her phone and called Damien. "He came in," she said. "Cole. He knows the report surfaced, and he ran the exact play 12 years ago. Product failure, you signed off. My father was generous to keep you, word for word almost. I could have killed him. But you didn't swing." "No, I swallowed it. It nearly choked me, but I swallowed it." There was a pause on the line, and then Damien said quietly, "Good. That's Ms. Sterling. That's the first time in 12 years somebody with power heard Cole tell that lie and didn't buy it. You don't know what that's worth. You held. That's the whole game. He's going to think you bought it, and that's exactly where we want him. A man who thinks he's winning gets careless. So, what do we do now? Now. Damien said, "We go find Tom Reyes. Because Cole just told you the junction fix is my fault, which means Cole's going to start looking for me, which means we've got maybe a week before he figures out we're working together. And in that week, we need the honest people. Tom's the first one. He's been sitting on things for years, same as me. Meet me tomorrow, not at my place. There's a diner on the south side where nobody from the towers ever set foot. Tom will come there. He won't come anywhere near that building for this." Tom Reyes came to the diner in a windbreaker with his reading glasses hanging off his collar, and when he saw Victoria sitting in the booth next to Damien, he stopped dead in the aisle. "Oh no," Tom said. No, Carter, what is this? You told me a friend needed help. You didn't say the friend was the CEO who fired you." "Sit down, Tom. I got 2 kids in college." "Sit down, Tom. Nobody's getting fired. Nobody's getting hurt. Sit down and order a coffee and listen for 5 minutes. And if you don't like what you hear, you can walk out, and I'll never bring it up again." Tom sat warily at the very edge of the booth, like a man keeping his exit open. Victoria didn't say anything. Damien had told her not to. "Tom won't trust it coming from you. Not yet. You're the tower to him. Let me." So she stayed quiet and let Damien talk to his friend. "Tom, how many years you been down in that basement watching Cole break things and land on his feet?" "Too many." "How many times you fixed something that failed exactly the way you knew it would, and watched it get written up as an accident, and kept your mouth shut because you got kids and a mortgage, and you saw what happened to me?" Tom didn't answer, but his jaw worked, and that was an answer. "I know," Damien said gently. "I know Tom, because I did the same thing for 12 years. And 3 weeks ago, I finally couldn't do it anymore. And it cost me my job, and you know what? It was worth it, because for the first time in 12 years, I looked in the mirror and saw myself instead of the man Cole made me pretend to be." He leaned forward. "Ms. Sterling knows now. All of it. The old project, what Cole did to me, the whole thing. Walter Briggs told her. She came to my apartment and apologized to my face, and she's not leaning back this time, Tom. She's fighting, and she's got the one thing you and I never had. She's got the chair. But she can't do it alone from up top, and I can't do it alone from the outside. We need the people in the middle. We need the honest ones to stop being scared." Tom looked at Victoria for the first time, really looked at her. "You know what he gave up," he said. "It wasn't a question. 12 years ago. You know what it cost him." "I know," Victoria said. "I watched him pick his daughter up from school yesterday. I know exactly what it cost him, and I know my family got rich partly because he stayed quiet. I'm not proud of that, but I'm here." Tom was quiet a long moment. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his windbreaker and pulled out a folded envelope worn soft at the creases, like it had been carried a long time, and he set it on the table between them. 19 months ago, Tom said. Cole pushed a maintenance contract through to a vendor. Cut-rate outfit. Cheapest bid by a mile way under everybody else, and I flagged it because you don't get bids that low unless somebody's cutting something they shouldn't. Cole told me to mind my own business, so I did. But I made a copy of the paperwork first because I'm an old man and I don't trust anybody. He tapped the envelope. That vendor, I looked it up. Registered 8 months before the contract. To an address that's a mailbox store. And one of the 2 names on the incorporation is a woman named Diane Pruitt. He looked at Victoria. "You know who Diane Pruitt is?" "No." "She's Richard Cole's sister-in-law." The booth went very still. "Cole's been routing company contracts to a shell company his own family owns," Tom said. "Cheapest bid, so nobody questions it, so it always wins. Then the shell company skims and delivers the bare minimum, and Cole covers the gaps by pushing the real work down onto guys like me and Carter, who fix it quiet, so it never shows up as a failure. He's been doing it for at least 19 months that I can prove. Probably longer." Tom sat back. That's why he wanted the integration deal rushed. It's not about the shareholder meeting. He's got the same shell outfit in on the integration maintenance contract, and if the thing ships on his timeline, the contract auto-renews for 5 years before anybody audits it. That's his bonus, all right. Just not the bonus that's on the books. Damien let out a long, slow breath, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. 19 months, Tom. You've been sitting on this for 19 months. What was I gonna do, Carter? Take it to who Cole ran the whole chain. And I saw what happened when you took the truth upstairs. You want me to be the next guy in the basement I got kids. Tom's voice cracked. I told myself I'd hold on to it. Wait for the day somebody up top could actually do something with it. I've been carrying that envelope for 19 months waiting for a person I could trust. He looked at Victoria. Are you that person? Because if I hand this over and you bury it like your father buried Carter, I'm finished, and I'm too old to start over. Victoria reached across the table, but she didn't take the envelope. She left it sitting there. I'm not going to take that from you, she said. Not today, because if I take it and it goes wrong, you're right, you're finished, and I don't have the right to risk your life on my word when my word's only 3 weeks old to you. She pushed it back toward him an inch. Keep it. Copy it. Put the copy somewhere safe that isn't your house or the building. And when we go to the board, and we're going to the board with everything all at once, so Cole can't pick us off one at a time the way he did 12 years ago, you'll walk in with the original in your hand and hand it over in front of witnesses. Not in a diner. Not to me alone. In the boardroom on the record where Cole can't bury it and I can't lose it. That's how we protect you. That's how we do it clean. Damien was looking at her, and there was something new in his face, not surprise exactly, but a kind of recognition. She'd just done the thing he'd been testing for since the day she showed up at his door. She'd had the evidence within reach, the thing that would win, and instead of grabbing it, she'd protected the man who carried it. She'd chosen clean over fast. She'd chosen the person over the win. Tom looked at Damien. She for real? Yeah, Damien said quietly. She's for real. I wasn't sure either. She's for real. Tom put the envelope back in his windbreaker, and his hand was shaking a little, and he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, then I'm in. God help me, I'm in. What do you need? More people, Damien said. You're not the only one carrying an envelope, Tom. You know that. There's others. The ones who watched what Cole did and kept copies because keeping copies was the only way to stay sane. We need them. All of them. One at a time, quiet. And none of them show a single card until we're all in the room together. Over the next 11 days, the honest people came out of the woodwork exactly the way Damien said they would. It started with Tom, and then Tom vouched for a woman named Reyes No Relation in procurement, who'd been quietly documenting the shell company bids for a year. And she vouched for a young analyst named Okafor, who'd noticed the auto-renewal clause and gotten a strange, threatening non-answer when he asked about it. And Okafor knew a contractor who'd worked for the shell company and quit in disgust when he saw what they were and weren't delivering. One at a time in the diner at Damien's kitchen table, after Lily was asleep in Victoria's car in a parking garage, the people Richard Cole had spent 20 years teaching to be afraid started to unlearn the lesson, because for the first time there was somebody at the top worth being brave for. And the strange thing, the thing Victoria hadn't expected, was that the person they were being brave for wasn't really her. It was Damien. Every single one of them, when they finally agreed to talk, said some version of the same thing. Carter's really back in this? The procurement woman asked. After what they did to him, if Carter thinks it's worth the risk, then okay. I trust Carter. Everybody in that basement trusts Carter. He'd been in the basement for 12 years, invisible to the 18th floor. And in all that time he'd built something the executives never had and never would, the complete unshakable trust of the people who actually kept the company running. They didn't come out for the CEO. They came out for the maintenance man who'd never once lied to them, never once thrown one of them under the bus, never once used his own troubles as an excuse to be less than decent to the next guy. That was the currency Damien had been quietly banking for 12 years, while he thought he was just surviving. Victoria said as much to him one night at his kitchen table, past 10. Both of them bleary over the growing pile of evidence, Lily long asleep down the hall. You know they're not doing this for me, she said. All of them. Tom Procurement Okafor. They're doing it for you. You realize that. They're doing it because it's right. They're doing it because you asked, and they trust you, and they don't trust anybody with a corner office, including me. 12 years in that basement, and you built more loyalty than my father built in 40. He had their fear. You've got their trust. That's—" She shook her head. "My father would never have understood the difference. He thought they were the same thing. Make people afraid enough and they'll follow you. You made people trust you enough that they'll risk their jobs for you. That's a kind of power he never had and never knew existed." Damien was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "It's not power," he said finally. "It's just Ms. Sterling. When you're the man everybody overlooks, you learn what it feels like to be overlooked. And once you know what it feels like, you can't do it to anybody else. So you learn people's names. You cover for the guy having a bad month. You don't step on the new kid to make yourself look better because you remember being the new kid. Nobody helped. It's not strategy. It's just you become the person you needed and nobody was." He looked up. "That's the only thing the basement ever gave me. It taught me not to become the men who put me there." Victoria didn't say anything for a while, and then quietly, "My father put you there. Cole put me there. Your father just decided the truth was too expensive to dig me out." Damien set his cup down. "I stopped being angry at your father a long time ago, Ms. Sterling. Anger's heavy, and I had a baby to carry. But I'll tell you the thing I never forgave, and it's not the basement. It's that he had the power to fix it every single day for 10 years, and every single day he chose not to. Cole did a wrong thing once. Your father did a small wrong thing 10,000 times every morning. He woke up knowing the truth and drank his coffee and didn't fix it." He held her eyes. "That's the thing you're not going to do. That's the whole reason I'm sitting at this table. Because you found the truth already dug up, and you didn't drink your coffee and walk away. Don't ever become the man who drinks the coffee. That's the only thing I'll ever ask you." "I won't," she said. Her voice wasn't quite steady. "I promise you, Damien, I won't." It was the first time she'd used his first name. Neither of them remarked on it. But something shifted in the small kitchen, some final wall between the CEO and the man she'd wronged, and what was left standing in its place was just two people at a table who'd decided the same thing mattered more than what it cost. They had 2 more days of quiet before Richard Cole figured it out. He figured it out because he was smart, and because Victoria had held too clean for too long. A CEO who'd bought his story about Carter should have moved on. And instead she kept finding reasons to review old contracts, kept pulling procurement records, kept asking the kind of questions that only made sense if she was building toward something. Cole watched and calculated, and one afternoon he walked into her office again without knocking, and this time he didn't sit down and he didn't smile. "You're working with him," Cole said. "Carter, aren't you?" Victoria's heart went cold, but her face didn't move. Damien had drilled her on this. When he confronts you, and he will, don't confirm and don't deny. Confirming gives him time to prepare. Denying makes you a liar he can expose later. Just make him unsure. "I'm reviewing contracts," she said. "That's my job, Richard. It's been my job for 8 months. You've never had a problem with it before. You've pulled every procurement file from the last 2 years. You've had 3 separate meetings with people I can't account for. And a maintenance man I fired for cause keeps turning up in the margins of everything you touch." Cole put both hands on her desk and leaned in. And for the first time in 8 months, the mentor was completely gone. And what was left was something Victoria found genuinely frightening. "I've been at this company 30 years, Victoria. I made your father a rich man. I made you. Do you understand that? The board wanted an outsider when your father stepped down, a real executive. I'm the one who stood up and said the daughter can do it, give her a chance. I put you in that chair, and I'm supposed to be grateful enough to stop asking questions. You're supposed to remember who your friends are." His voice dropped. "Carter is a liability. He always was. Whatever he's told you about 12 years ago, it's the bitter story of a man who failed and needed somebody to blame. If you tie yourself to him, if you build something on his word, you're building on sand. And when it collapses, and it will, it won't take me down, Victoria. I've survived worse than a maintenance man with a grudge. It'll take you down. Your first year. Your father's company. All of it gone because you trusted the wrong man." He straightened up. "I'm telling you this because I still care about you. Walk away from Carter. Today. Before this becomes something neither of us can stop." And Victoria Sterling looked up at the man who had buried Damien Carter 12 years ago and was trying to bury him again. The man who'd just admitted in so many words that he had the power to end her, and she felt afraid, genuinely, physically afraid. And underneath the fear, she felt something her father had apparently never felt in the same situation, which was a total bedrock refusal. "Get your hands off my desk, Richard," she said quietly. He blinked. "You heard me. Off my desk. This is my office. My father's name is on the building, but the chair is mine, and you will not lean over my desk and threaten me in it." She stood up so they were eye to eye. "You want to know if I'm working with Damien Carter? Here's your answer. I'm working with the truth. And if the truth happens to have Damien Carter's name on it, that's not my problem, Richard. That's yours." For a moment, something flickered across Cole's face that she'd never seen their uncertainty. He'd expected her to fold. Everyone always folded. Her father had folded. And instead, the young woman he'd put in the chair was standing up straight and telling him to get his hands off her desk, and he didn't have a script for that, because in 30 years, nobody in that building had ever refused to be afraid of him. He recovered fast. "You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's mine to make, and I'd rather make it standing up than make my father sitting down. We're done here. Close the door on your way out." Cole left, and the moment he was gone, Victoria sat down hard because her legs had gone to water, and she picked up her phone with a shaking hand and called Damien. "He knows," she said. "He confronted me. He threatened me, not the junction, me, my job, the whole thing. He said he put me in this chair and he can take me out of it. And he's not wrong, Damien. He's connected to half the board. If he moves first, he could actually do it." "What did you tell him?" "I told him to get his hands off my desk." There was a silence on the line. And then Damien Carter laughed a real laugh, surprised out of him the first full laugh she'd ever heard from the man. "You told him to get his hands off your desk," he repeated. "Was that wrong? Tom said don't confirm or deny, but No. No, it wasn't wrong. Ms. Sterling Victoria, that's the most right thing you've done yet." His voice had gone warm and certain. 12 years ago I stood in front of that man and I had nobody. No power, no allies, no chair, no folder. Nothing but the truth and a signature they twisted against me. And I lost. And I've spent 12 years wondering if I lost because I was weak or because the game was rigged. And you just told me the answer. You had the chair and you had the fear and you stood up anyway. The game was rigged. It was always rigged. It just took somebody with power finally deciding not to play it. He's going to move first, Damien. He said this becomes something neither of us can stop. He's not going to wait for us to be ready. He's going to go to the board and get ahead of it and paint us both as, then we don't wait either. Damien's voice was steady now, decided. He's spooked, and a spooked man moves fast and sloppy. That's our opening. We call the board meeting first. Everybody at once, everything at once, every envelope in every honest hand, all in the same room where he can't pick us off one at a time. Tom walks in with his original. Procurement walks in with hers. Okafor with the auto-renewal clause. Walter Briggs on a video call for the old story. And me. He paused. I walk back into that building I walked out of, and this time I don't put my badge on the table. This time I put the truth on it. All of it. And you stand next to me, and you don't lean back. When? 3 days. It has to be before Cole can get his story to the board first. Can you call an emergency session in 3 days? Victoria closed her eyes. 3 days. Everything all at once, no room for error against a man who'd been winning this exact game for 30 years with her own job on the line and her father's company in the balance. Yes, she said. I can call it 3 days. Then it's 3 days. A beat. Victoria, get some sleep tonight. You did good today. You did the thing I couldn't do 12 years ago. Whatever happens in that boardroom, you already did the hardest part. You stood up." She hung up and sat alone in her office as the light went down over the city, 32 years old, 3 days from the fight of her life. And for the first time since she'd taken her father's chair, she didn't feel like a fraud sitting in it. She felt like she was finally actually earning it, not by looking strong, not by never blinking, not by making people afraid, but by standing next to a good man and refusing to lean back. Across the city, Damien Carter set down his phone and stood in his kitchen for a long time under the drawing that said, "My dad fixes everything." Then he went down the hall and looked in on his daughter asleep with one sock on and one sock somewhere in the bed, and he stood in her doorway the way he did every night, and he made her the same promise he made her every night silent in his head. "Whatever it costs, you'll never go without." Only this time there was something new underneath it. Because for 12 years, he'd kept that promise by swallowing a lie, by keeping his head down, by being smaller than he was, so his daughter could be safe. And in 3 days, he was going to keep it a different way. He was going to walk back into the building that had thrown him away, and stand up straight, and take the truth back from the man who'd stolen it, not just for himself, and not just for Victoria, and not just for the honest people in the basement who'd finally stopped being afraid, for her. So that someday, when she was old enough to understand it, Lily would know that her father hadn't just fixed everything. He'd fixed the one thing that mattered most. 3 days later, Damien Carter walked back into the building he'd walked out of, and this time he came through the front door. He'd thought about that on the drive over, that for 12 years he'd used the service entrance badge, scanned freight elevator down to the basement where the company kept the man it was ashamed of. And now he parked in the visitor lot, and he crossed the lobby in the one good suit he owned, the one he'd worn to his wife's funeral, and hadn't put on since, and he walked past the security desk where a young guard started to stop him, and then didn't, because Victoria had left his name at the front, and there are some men who, when they finally stand up straight, you don't stop. She was waiting for him by the elevators. She looked at the suit and didn't say anything about it, which he appreciated. "You ready?" she asked. 12 years ready. Cole's already up there. He got wind of the session and got there early. He's been in the boardroom 20 minutes working the room before anybody else arrived. Her jaw tightened. He's doing exactly what he did to you. Getting ahead of it. Poisoning the well before we even walk in. "Good," Damien said. "Good. Let him spend his 20 minutes. A man working the room that hard is a man who's scared. You don't work a room you think you own." He looked at her. "Is everybody here?" "Tom, procurement, Okafor." "All of them, downstairs. On my signal they come up together." She held up her phone. "Walter Briggs is standing by for the video call. He said, and I quote, he's waited 12 years to say this on the record, and he's not going to be late for it." Damien almost smiled. "Then let's not keep Walter waiting." They rode up together. And in the mirrored elevator watching the floor numbers climb, Victoria said the thing she'd been holding. "Damien, if this goes wrong, if Cole gets to enough of the board first, if they side with him, it's not just me who loses my chair. You lose everything you've built these 3 weeks. The honest ones downstairs. Tom, all of them, they came out because of you. And if we lose Cole, comes for every single one of them. I need you to know I know that. This isn't only my risk. It's theirs. It's yours. I know. How are you so calm?" Damien watched the numbers climb. "Because I already lost this fight once," he said. 12 years ago in that same building, and I lost it alone with no allies and no evidence and no chair on my side. And I survived it. I raised a daughter through it. So whatever happens up there today, it can't be worse than what already happened. And last time I was alone." He looked at her. "This time I'm not. That's the whole difference. A man who's already survived losing everything and come out the other side with a good kid, and his soul still intact, that man's not afraid of a boardroom Victoria. There's nothing in that room that can take anything from me I haven't already learned to live without." The doors opened on the 18th floor. The boardroom was full when they walked in. 11 board members around the long table, and Richard Cole standing at the head of it like he already ran the meeting mid-sentence, and Damien caught the tail of it as he came through the door. "And I think we all owe Victoria some grace. Here she's young, she's under pressure, and she's fallen under the influence of a former employee with a serious grudge and a documented history of. Cole saw them. He stopped. And Damien watched it happen, the thing he'd been waiting 12 years to see. He watched Richard Cole look at him, not the maintenance man in gray, not the kid he'd buried, but a man in a dark suit walking into the boardroom with his head up and the CEO at his side. And he watched for just a half second. Uncertainty crossed Cole's face before the mask snapped back into place. "Ah," Cole said, recovering, turning it into theater for the board. "Speak of the devil, Damien Carter himself. Victoria, you actually brought him into a board meeting. I have to say this confirms every concern I just raised." "Sit down, Richard," Victoria said. "I'm only trying to sit down." And there was something in her voice that had not been there 8 months ago, or even 3 weeks ago. And Richard Cole heard it, and the board heard it, and Cole sat. Victoria took the head of the table. Damien stood at her right hand where Cole used to stand. "I called this session," Victoria said to the 11 faces around the table, "because 3 weeks ago I made the worst decision of my time in this chair, and I've spent every day since trying to understand how I made it and how to undo it. Some of you already have opinions about the man standing next to me, because Richard's had 20 minutes, and I'm sure he used them well. So before anyone decides anything, I'm going to ask you to do the one thing this company failed to do 12 years ago. I'm going to ask you to look at the evidence before you look at the man." She turned. Damien, and Damien Carter, who had rehearsed nothing, who had spent 12 years learning that the truth doesn't need decoration, laid it out. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make it about himself. He walked them through the junction first because the junction was fresh and provable. The report, the buried override, the 10 days it ran hot exactly as predicted. The disaster that didn't happen only because they'd rerouted around it at the last possible moment. He put the timeline on the table. He put the override on the table. And he watched the board's faces move from skepticism to attention, because engineers who fail are one thing, but engineers who predict a failure to the day are another. And there were enough people at that table who understood machines to know the difference. "That's the junction," Damien said. "That's just the thing that almost happened this month, but the junction's a symptom, so I'll show you the disease." He looked at Victoria. She nodded. She sent the signal. The door opened, and the honest people came in. Tom Reyes first in his good windbreaker, gripping the worn envelope he'd carried for 19 months. Then the procurement woman with her year of documented shell company bids. Then Okafor, young and pale and terrified, and there anyway with the auto-renewal clause that would have locked the fraud in for 5 years. They came in one after another and stood along the wall of the boardroom. Ordinary people from the middle and the bottom of the company, the ones the board had never learned the names of, and their presence alone changed the temperature of the room. "These are the people who actually run this company," Damien said quietly. "You don't know them. That's not their fault. It's yours and it's mine, and it's the whole way this place has been built. The people who know the truth are always the people nobody bothers to look at. Well, look at them now." Tom Reyes stepped forward. His hands were shaking. He looked at Victoria, and she gave him the smallest nod in the room on the record, where nobody can bury it. And Tom set his envelope on the boardroom table in front of 11 witnesses and opened it. 19 months ago. Tom said, his voice unsteady and then steadying as he went. Richard Cole pushed a maintenance contract to a vendor called Meridian Facilities Group. Cheapest bid by a mile. I flagged it. He told me to mind my business, so I copied the paperwork first. He laid it out page by page the way Damien had coached him, the incorporation, the mailbox address, the 8 months before the contract registration, and the name. One of the 2 owners of Meridian is Diane Pruitt. Diane Pruitt is Richard Cole's sister-in-law. He's been routing company money to his own family's shell company for at least 19 months and covering the gaps by making men like me and Carter fix the shortfalls quiet so it never showed up as a failure. The room went absolutely still. And Richard Cole, who had survived 30 years by always having somewhere to point, stood up. "This is..." His voice was tight now, the easy confidence gone. "This is a coordinated ambush. A disgruntled maintenance man, a technician looking to save his own skin, and a CEO in over her head, all of them. "Diane Pruitt," said one of the board members, an older woman near the far end, who'd been silent until now. She was looking at Tom's paperwork through half glasses. "Richard, your wife's maiden name is Pruitt. I've been to your house. I've met Diane." She looked up. "Is this your sister-in-law's company?" Cole opened his mouth. And for the first time in the story of Richard Cole, nothing came out that could save him. "There's more," Damien said into the silence. "Procurement's got a year of the bids. Okafor's got the auto-renewal clause that would have locked it in for 5 years if the integration had shipped on Cole's timeline. That's why he pushed it so hard. Not the shareholder meeting. The renewal. And there's one more voice you should hear, because this isn't the first time Richard Cole buried the truth to protect himself." He looked at Victoria. "Walter." Victoria turned her laptop toward the table, and Walter Briggs' face filled the screen. 71 years old, angry and clear, 12 years of waiting in his eyes. "My name is Walter Briggs," the old man said. "I ran engineering at this company for 30 years, and I retired because I couldn't stomach what I'm about to tell you. 12 years ago, a 23-year-old engineer named Damien Carter warned this company that a flagship product was going to fail. He was right. Richard Cole buried the warning, shipped the product, and when it failed and someone got hurt, Cole pinned it on the boy who'd tried to stop it. And this company's leadership decided the truth was too expensive, and they put the best young engineer I ever trained in the basement for 12 years to keep it quiet." Walter leaned toward the camera. "I've carried that for 12 years. So has that man standing in your boardroom. So I'll say it once on the record for anybody at that table who still has a conscience: Damien Carter didn't fail this company 12 years ago. This company failed him. And if you let Richard Cole walk out of that room today, you're not 11 board members. You're just the next people who decided the truth was too expensive." The screen went quiet. Nobody at the table spoke for a long moment. And then Victoria Sterling stood. "12 years ago," she said. "My father sat where I'm sitting, and he had all of this same information, and he made a choice. He chose to protect Richard Cole and bury Damien Carter because fixing it was expensive and inconvenient and would have embarrassed this company. I found that out 3 weeks ago, and I've had to live with the fact that my whole life was paid for, partly by that silence." Her voice was steady and carrying. "I can't undo my father's choice, but I can refuse to make it again. So here's what happens now. Richard Cole is removed effective immediately, pending a full independent audit of every contract he's touched, which we will refer to the authorities. And Damien Carter." "You have no idea what you're doing," Cole cut in, and now there was real venom in it, the mask entirely gone. "I built this company. I built you, and you're throwing it all away for a maintenance man and his sob story." And Damien Carter finally spoke to Richard Cole directly for the first time in 12 years, and his voice was quiet, and it filled the room. "I want you to say it," Damien said. Cole stopped. "Say what?" "The thing you always say. The thing you said 12 years ago, and the thing you tried to say to Victoria 3 weeks ago. Say I'm just a maintenance man. Say I'm replaceable. Say it out loud one more time in front of all of them." Damien took a step toward him. "Because for 12 years, you were right. I let you be right. I put my head down, and I let the whole building believe the man in the basement was small because I had a baby to feed and no way to fight you. So go ahead, Richard. Call me replaceable one more time. I want these people to hear it, and I want them to hear what comes after it." Cole's jaw worked, and then because a cornered man reaches for the only weapon he's ever known, he said it. "You are replaceable. You always were. You're a technician with a wrench and a grudge, and the only reason anybody in this room is listening to you is the man you just called replaceable," Victoria said, and she was on her feet and her voice cut Cole off like a blade. "Is the reason this company still exists. He warned us about a failure that would have taken down every client system in this building, and when we ignored him, he was proven right down to the day. He built the safety systems half of you have relied on for a decade without knowing his name. He kept your machines running for 12 years, while this company pretended he didn't exist. And when he finally stood up and told the truth, we fired him for it the same way we buried him 12 years ago. She looked around the table, 11 faces. So no, Richard. He's not the replaceable one in this room. You are. You're the one we're going to do just fine without. He's the one we nearly didn't survive losing. Cole looked around this table, and he found no faces to point at, no ally, no exit. In 30 years, he had never once been in a room where the truth was out, and there was nowhere left to route it. Security was already at the door. Victoria had arranged that too. And Richard Cole, who had put a good man in a basement for 12 years, was walked out of the building he thought he owned, and the door closed behind him, and it was over. But Damien didn't feel the thing he'd expected to feel. For 12 years, he'd imagined this moment, the vindication the room-turning Cole exposed. And now that it was here standing in the quiet boardroom, what he felt wasn't triumph. It was something quieter and deeper. It was the feeling of setting down a weight he'd carried so long he'd forgotten it wasn't part of him. The board voted that afternoon, not just to remove Cole, but to formally clear Damien Carter's record 12 years late on the record in the minutes where it would live, as long as the company did. The failure that had ruined a 23-year-old was reassigned to the man who'd actually caused it. And the older board member, who'd recognized Diane Pruitt's name, made a motion, and it carried unanimously, that the company issue Damien Carter 12 years of backstanding and a formal apology signed by every person at that table. Then Victoria offered him the job. Not his old one. She was clear about that. I'm creating a position. She told him that evening, after the board had gone, the two of them alone in the boardroom, where it had all finally come apart and back together. Vice President of Systems Integrity. You'd oversee safety and integrity across the whole company. You'd have the authority to stop any project, any timeline, any contract, including mine, if you found it wasn't safe. Nobody could bury a report of yours ever again, because you'd be the one they report to. She looked at him. You'd never be in the basement again, Damien. You'd be at the top of the building, where you should have been 12 years ago. Damien was quiet for a long moment. I've got one condition, he said. Name it. The same one I told you 3 weeks ago. No position in this company, not mine, not yours, not anybody's, should ever require a person to ignore the truth to keep it. You write that into the job, into the whole company. You make it so that the next kid who walks into a boardroom scared holding a report nobody wants to read doesn't end up where I ended up. You build a place where telling the truth costs you nothing. That's my condition, not for me. I'm fine now. For the next one. Done, Victoria said. I'll write it myself. He took the job. And that was how the man who'd walked out of that building with a toolbox walked back into it 3 weeks later, with a title and an office, and the authority to make sure no one would ever again be punished for doing what he'd done. Months passed, and the strange, wonderful thing was how little of Damien Carter's life actually changed. He still got up at 4:40 because his body still didn't know how to do anything else, and now it didn't have to, but he liked it. The quiet hour before the world woke, so he kept it. He still made the coffee and scrambled the eggs soft and cut the toast into triangles. He still braided Lily's hair on the doorstep some mornings when they were running late. And every single afternoon, no matter what meeting was on the calendar, no matter which executive wanted 5 more minutes at 2:50, Damien Carter stood up and said, "That's it. I've got the only appointment I don't break," and drove across the city and stood outside an elementary school at 3:30, exactly because he always was and he always would be. Victoria changed more than he did. She became over those months a different kind of CEO than the one who'd told a maintenance man to follow the rules or leave. She learned the names of the people in the basement. She learned that the quietest person in a meeting is often the one worth listening to, and that a room full of people nodding is usually a room where something's about to go wrong. She stopped confusing being feared with being followed. And when the shareholders at that same meeting she'd once been so terrified of asked her how she'd caught the fraud that had been bleeding the company for years, she stood up in front of all of them and told the truth that she hadn't caught it. That a man everyone had overlooked had been trying to tell them for over a decade, and that the only thing she'd done right was finally at last decide to listen. And she kept coming to dinner. It started as work late nights at the kitchen table, going over integrity reports, and then somewhere along the way it stopped being work. Lily decided she liked her. Lily, who judged people with the clean severity of a 7-year-old, decided that a woman who did a wrong thing and drove all the way across the city to make it right was a woman worth keeping around. And once Lily decided that the thing was more or less settled, because Damien Carter had never in his life been able to argue with his daughter about who was worth keeping. One evening in the spring, Victoria knocked on the door, the same door she'd stood at that first morning in a coat that cost more than his car, and Lily opened it, grinning. "You came for dinner again?" Victoria laughed. "Only if your dad says yes." And from the kitchen over, the sound of something good on the stove, Damien Carter looked up at the woman who'd thrown him away and then spent everything she had to make it right. And he found that the anger he'd carried for 12 years was simply gone. Had been gone for a while, and what stood in its place was something he hadn't let himself feel since his wife died. The possibility, just the quiet possibility, that a man who'd spent so long carrying everything alone might not have to carry it alone forever. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I say yes." He'd walked out of that building once with a toolbox and nothing else, certain he was losing everything, and it had turned out to be the day he finally started getting it all back. His name, his truth, his worth, and something he'd stopped believing was for him. He had spent 12 years being the man everyone overlooked, the quiet one in the gray uniform, the one the world judged before it ever heard his story. The world had heard his story now. And in the end, the man who put his badge on the table, rather than sign his name to a lie, didn't just save a company, or clear his name, or find his way from the basement to the top floor. He proved the one thing the powerful men who'd buried him never understood, and never would, that the truest measure of a person is never the title on their door, or the suit on their back, but what they refuse to do when doing wrong would be easier, and that the man everyone overlooks is very often the only one strong enough to save them all. Damien Carter had always known his own worth. Now at last, so did everyone else.